the provider information that we share with people the first 5 minutes of the meeting into our COVID data. So fortunate, well, I should not say anything. I was going to say the numbers have slowed down a little bit in the month of October. We have to date had 837 people who've been diagnosed with COVID. Just so people are aware, of those, 105 have also contracted it a second and sometimes a third time. So if anyone is looking at the information that we share and adding up all the numbers, you'll see that it equals more than 837 because some people appear more than once, including, for example, in the month of October, we have had 5 people who have contracted COVID. One of those had contracted it previously. Of those 5, all 5 were in intermediate care facilities. So to date, we have had, which would be just slightly down on this, please, Charlisa. Could I move back? Yeah, that's right. So if we scroll down a little bit on the thing that's being presented on the screen, Charlisa, then people will see to date, we have had 1 person in a correctional facility, 26 in host homes, 158 in intermediate care facilities, 1 in a mental health facility, 189 in natural homes, 2 in nursing homes, 7 in out-of-state placements. Keep scrolling, please. Thank you. 63 in residential habilitation and 390 in supported living. We have had to date 146 people who have required inpatient treatment for COVID. Fortunately, in the month, which you'll see a little further down on this, thank you. Fortunately, in the month of October, there have been no people of the 5 people who contracted COVID. Some couple were asymptomatic, the others required some treatment. No one required inpatient treatment. And to date, we have had 38 people who have had confirmed COVID deaths. The last one of those was in September of 2021. So on our agenda today, we're going to hear from Musu Fofana and Pam Harmon about people asked one more time, as people are aware, the federal public health emergency ended in May. We have been able to continue our Appendix K flexibilities for 6 months following the end of the public health emergency. So we have 2 previous times done this presentation about the unwinding of the federal public health emergency. And people have asked, given that it's coming up in just the next few weeks, could we go through that information one more time? So Musu and Pam Harmon are going to talk about that today. We're also going to have a presentation today about our NEON grant, but I believe that first up is the presentation regarding unwinding following the public health emergency. And Musu is now sharing her screen. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as Director Reese said, the public health emergency ended on May 11th. And so we've been able to keep flexibilities in place with regard to companion services. And so the purpose of the communication today is to advise that those flexibilities will be ending soon because we're coming to the close of the 6-month period past the ending of the public health emergency. So specifically related to companion services, the flexibility of the 1-to-2 ratio, which, as you know, was added during the pandemic as a flexibility, will no longer be authorized. So persons who have a 1-to-2 staffing ratio for companion services, those authorizations will be automatically terminated on November 11th, 2023. We will resume staffing ratios for companion of 1-to-1 and 1-to-3. So companion services may no longer be authorized to providers who were not approved prior to the pandemic to provide this service. Again, these authorizations will be automatically terminated on November 11th. If any provider has questions about whether or not they are approved to provide companion services beyond November 11th, please reach out to your assigned contract administrator. Companion services can be used in combination with other day services, but it will no longer be billed during the implementation as a remote day service. Also, the flexibility of family members or legally responsible people serving as a DSP for companion services will no longer be approved or authorized per the waiver regulation. And this excludes My Life, My Way program participants. So those are the highlights of the flexibilities that will no longer be authorized after November 11th, 2023.
Thank you, Pam. And so to continue the presentation, just a little recap of all the different notifications that we've made to stakeholders. As Director Reese mentioned, there have been multiple presentations at the community and provider forums on the unwinding plan since 2022. There has been a presentation at the DDS Provider Fair. There have been transmittals to DDS providers, letters to families, advocates, guardians of persons supported. QAPMA has presented on this at the Provider Coalition, and there's also been a presentation to members of Project Action. So again, just to recap, why are we doing this? It is so that people can have a meaningful day and they can reconnect with their communities, consistent with their preferences, their choices, and their needs. Just a reminder that prior to the public health emergency, companion services were only included in a person's ISP after the team had considered the appropriateness of other waiver services, such as day help, employment readiness, individualized day, and supported employment. So effective November 1st, the IDT teams will be reviewing companion services. And this review is required for all people who are currently receiving companion services to ensure that people have access to meaningful day options. The only exceptions will be people who have a documented health or medical condition that is a barrier to employment or day services, people who are 65 and older and prefer to explore retirement options, people who received 3 or more days a week of companion prior to the public health emergency and wish to continue to receive 3 or more days a week of companion. Now, how will the team be documenting this? So service coordinators will schedule these meetings, and at the end of the meeting, they will document in MCIS the outcome of the meeting. If the team decides to decrease or cancel companion services and explore other day supports, the service coordinator will indicate that in the record. If the person's services are under $75,000 and they wish to continue to receive 5 days a week of companion, they will be invited or encouraged to enroll in self-direction. Now, for people who are receiving companion 3 or more days a week and opting not to explore alternative day supports, the team will have to complete the Meaningful Day Assessment and Planning tool. And that is to make sure that people are having meaningful days consistent with their person-centered thinking tools. What we will need from providers is to please support timely meetings. These meetings have been going on for a while. Please continue to support those timely meetings. Services for the people that Pam mentioned, people in host homes, people enrolled in Companion 1 to 2, those services are being canceled effective November 12th. Again, like Pam said, if you believe that your agency or that you are a provider that was approved to provide Companion pre-pandemic, please contact your contract administrator. Service coordinators are unable to reschedule or cancel meetings without confirmation by the contract administrator or waiver. So what's going to happen with the Meaningful Day Assessment and Planning tool? The tool will encourage interdisciplinary teams or assist them with determining the need for amendments to current day authorizations, and also to support people with returning to community-based in-person supports that are consistent with their preferences and needs. We need Companion providers to ensure that the Companion schedule is available for team review during the MAP meeting. This is an example of what the tool that service coordinators will be completing looks like. So basically, they'll just be checking what the outcome of the meeting is. For people who choose to remain in 5 days or more a week of Companion, the service coordinator will go on to complete the Meaningful Day Assessment and Planning tool. And in the Meaningful Day Assessment and Planning tool, the first question that we'll be asking is who is providing the Companion services? Because based on the Medicaid waiver rules, Medicaid reimbursable Companion services cannot be provided by family members. So the first question we'll be asking is, who is the DSP for Companion? And so there's a checkbox here for indicating that information. The next question we'll ask is, we want to look at what is the person doing during the day in Companion? And what, what are their preferences, and what does a meaningful day look like for the person? What would they like to do during the day? And we have a number of options. Some people may want to explore new interests and hobbies. Some people may be interested in building skills, socialization, increasing their engagement in physical activity, exploring employment options. People may be interested in assistive technology that meets their needs. And of course, there's an option for service coordinators to enter other activities that are not captured in this section. And then depending on what the person's preferences are, the next question would be, is the person currently participating in that activity? And if the response is yes, we want specifics. We want to know what the interest is, what the hobby is. If it is socialization, is it virtual or in person? We want to know how frequently they're doing this, where they're doing it, the service that's providing it, as well as the provider. And that is why it's important that we have the Companion schedule available during the IDT meeting for the team to review and verify the information that is being provided. The next question we will ask is whether there are any barriers to community participation. We want to know whether maybe obtaining a community program that meets the person's needs is a problem, whether it's internet connectivity, whether it's transportation, whether the program that they want to attend is not ready to accept participants, whether transportation is an issue. And the reason why we're asking for this information is to support the person with addressing these barriers or seeking alternatives or interim options while we are addressing those barriers for the person. And finally, as an outcome of the meeting, we want to know, what does a person's day look like? Are they spending most of their time in the week doing things that match their interests? Are they spending most days at home? Are they integrated with their community? And that's another question that the team will have to respond to. And overall, we want to know how satisfied the person is with Companion services. Again, the reason why we're asking all these questions is, again, to really look at what does Companion look like for people who choose to remain in Companion more than 3 days a week. of course, if the person is engaging in activities that are meaningful to them based on the responses, then the service coordinator will indicate that the person is engaged with their community, participating in skill building activities as per the companion schedule, as documented in the companion program plan and the quarterly progress reports. And then at the end, we just want to know who participated in the meeting. If the person is not satisfied with companion, then we have suggestions. Service coordinators have to look at other services for the person. They need to look at amending those companion goals. Ultimately, we want to make sure that people are engaged with their community. If you have case-specific questions regarding unwinding from the public health emergency, please contact your assigned service coordinator. The supervisors and program managers are also available to support this effort. If you are a provider and have questions about whether you are approved for companion, please contact your assigned contract administrator. Again, I want to reiterate that service coordinators will need authorization from the contract administrator to reschedule or cancel any meetings that are scheduled because a provider is not approved for companion. Thank you, and I'm just going to pause there. This is just another picture. Again, I think we've shown this picture at previous forums, just an example of, people out in the community, doing things that are meaningful to them. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Musu. Let's just see. Based on the current regulations, a person in host home is not supposed to receive companion. However, what happens if the person is 65 and older and does not want other day services?
Then the person will have to remain at home. I'm going to let Pam answer the waiver piece of it, because I believe there are some hours built into the rate for host homes. So Pam, if you can unmute yourself and maybe kind of weigh in on this question.
So that question would need to be vetted through doing a look back to see what that person was enrolled in prior to the pandemic, what types of activities they were involved in that contributed to a meaningful day for that person. So it's just not a cookie cutter answer that I could answer at this time. We individualize those cases to look at what is meaningful, important to, and important for that person.
But Pam, just to clarify, if the person is in a host home, they cannot continue to receive companion, correct?
That is correct. It's not a service that's built into the regulation for persons who reside in a host home.
So again, I think I agree with what Pam said. It's not a cookie cutter response, but the team will have to explore other options for the person. It will not be companion, because that service is being canceled effective November the 11th.
So if this says they were in natural home, well, now they're in host home, and unfortunately, the reality is the regulations provide that in host home, you cannot have companion service. So the team will have to work with the person on developing a schedule for them, identifying, as Musu said, appropriate activities to help the person be as engaged as possible in the community. Someone asked, please clarify definition of family members.
Family member is someone related to the person in care or who is legally responsible for that person, for the care of that person. And so per the regulation for companion services, that is a flexibility that will no longer be authorized after November 11th.
Other questions?
I have a question. My name is Adrienne with the companion services. And is it possible to get a copy or a link of a copy regarding, again, what constitutes a family member, and it's, and I am a parent of a daughter. What constitutes an actual family member, and where is that in DDS policy and procedure, so I can actually see something visual to identify that? That's my question number one. And question number two is, if there are some significant extenuating circumstances, is there any room for a possible meeting as a family member with someone, or with, I'm the mother. Is it possible to set up a time where I can actually have opportunity to talk, not just in this setting, but just to have a conversation? Is that possible? So one is, what actually constitutes a family member? And two, is it possible to get a copy of the policy and procedure? Because I'm a little confused about what I was given information about several years ago when my daughter first started with DDS, and then being able to come in, and who I would actually sit down and have a conversation with about some extenuating circumstances. I'd like to know that, if possible.
So I'm gonna two responses, and Musu, feel free to unmute and jump in and correct or add to this. First of all, I'll say I did notice that Mark Back is in the meeting. So I'm going to ask Mark if you could copy into the chat the link to the appropriate regulation so that people can see where they can find this rule regarding companion services. Keep in mind, we're talking here only about companion services. It doesn't mean that family members can't be providers. They can provide in-home supports, correct, Musu? And so that the family members can work for a provider agency and be the in-home support provider. That didn't change. That is in our waiver. What is different is our waiver specifically says that companion services cannot be provided. That service cannot be provided by a family member. And I've asked Mark, I'm hoping he'll be able to put that in the chat.
Already
I
did.
do see there are, okay, wonderful. There are other, so the link to those rules is in the chat for people. I do see there are other questions in the chat, but first I also noticed that some people had their hand up before those questions popped up. So I'm going to first call on Shani Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. So my question is in regards to companion. It's actually in regards to the exception. So once the physician writes the letter about the medical condition and states that companion services is the most integrated setting, I just need clarity on how long the processing time is for that letter, one. And then two, is companion services to stay in place until the letter is processed? And then three, if it is denied, will companion services remain in place until the appeal, let's say the family wants to appeal, until the appeal process is completed?
All right, so what I want to make clear is that, so for people that wish to remain in companion services where you don't have a family member providing the service, they're not in a host home setting, for people who wish to remain in the service, what we're going to be looking at is, what does a meaningful day look like for them? So if for example, a provider says that someone cannot receive companion because they have a health or medical condition, and the physician writes the letter, what we want to see is, how does that health and medical condition present a barrier to that person being in the community, going out in the community, doing things in the community? I would hope that it would be reviewed within at least a week and feedback provided to the team. And I don't know if that really answers all your question. When you talk about an appeal, what I think will happen is that if the reason that's provided is not sufficient, then the team has to meet again, look at what the person is doing during the day, look at that map tool and about what makes sense for the person.
Okay, so you did answer part of the question. I appreciate that. Now, once that process or that form is being reviewed, is companion services to stay in place while it's being reviewed? And let's say it takes longer than a week. What is the family's next recourse? So if we're on week 3 or 4 or the second month, and now companion services have been cut,
Nah,
what is the recourse for the family at that point?
we're not going to cancel a person's companion services just because we're in the process of reviewing some medical documentation, because that would leave the person without the supports they need during the day. As long as this companion services comply with the rules, which means the person is not in a host home. If they're in a natural home and it's not being provided by a family member, we're not gonna just leave the person in a gap like that. So yes, companion services will continue.
So if a family is left in a gap like that, who do they reach out to?
I don't see that happening, but if it does happen, please reach out to the service coordinator. You can reach out to the program managers. That's any of the program managers and myself. I'm also one of the program managers in service coordination. You can reach out to Deputy Winslow. I mean, that shouldn't happen.
We
Okay.
want to highlight one thing I hear Musu saying, which is if it's not a family member providing the service, the person can still get companion perhaps, and they will get it in the interim while the decision is being made, but not by a family member. We do have providers who provide companion service, so it may be that the person has to transition to someone else to receive that service.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
So it's the two separate questions. Thank you. And next, Tanya Coppin.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Thank you. So this is not about, this is more about providers who have those specialized situations where people may be elderly or they may be going to a program and we were utilizing companion services. I know that we're doing it by case, but is there any consideration for maybe an expedited process where if the provider was not previously a companion provider, because now that the services are going away, what we realize is you guys gave it as an emergency, but there were a lot of providers who originally did not have that as an authorized service. Is there going to be any consideration for maybe an expedited process where we can add that on as one of our services?
I would ask that you follow up with your contract administrator to vet that process. If
Okay.
in fact you're interested in adding companion on as one of the services that you provide.
Okay.
The contract
All right.
administrator can guide you through the steps and provide you with a timeline for how long that approval process would take.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
So now there are other questions in the chat. I do also want to clarify for people that Mark also provided for us in the rules, the definition of family, any person related to the person by blood, marriage, or adoption. And people may be aware that DC maintains very liberal definitions of family, so which normally works very much to people's benefit, but I guess in this instance, people might feel differently. So would all or most companion services be transitioned to IDS? That's for Musu. I mean, the team has to decide if companion's ending, what the appropriate service is, right?
Absolutely, yes. It has to be, it could be IDS, it could be employment readiness.
Please, it could be supported employment.
Yes, referral to RSA to
I
help the
mean-
person get a job. Yes. So there are many options.
Can a family member who does not stay with a person be the companion or IDS staff? Musu?
Yes, I think that goes back to what Mark said. A family member is anyone that's related to the person, either by adoption or by blood. So even if they don't stay with the person, if they're related to the person, they're considered a family member. They cannot provide companion services.
Can you clarify what you mean by providers who are authorized to provide companion services and contacting the program administrator? I mean, Pam, do you want to take, I
Yes.
mean, our providers become authorized to provide particular, they have a Medicaid provider agreement that authorizes them to provide particular services under the Medicaid program. So providers are authorized to provide those services that are included in their Medicaid provider agreement. So each provider agency should look at their provider agreement to identify which services they are authorized to provide. And then they can contact their contract administrator to discuss what the process is for adding other services to that. We're very late in the game for that, though, seems to me. I want to make sure that I've gotten to all the questions. I think we've answered this, but I'll go ahead and repeat it just so I've said the whole question. What if the family wants to be the staff to their family member because they feel more comfortable being their staff as a provider? Can we treat such circumstances as an exception? No, not for companion services. There are services that family members can provide. And in addition, if the person is eligible to be in the IFS waiver, they could do participant-directed services and choose their own staff, and there is no limitation on who that staff is. I see, Shani, that you've raised your hand again. I'm going to make sure that I've gotten to everything in the chat, and then I will come back to you. To confirm, service coordinators will reach out to providers for these meetings, correct? Also, what happens if these meetings do not take place? I think they've been taking place, haven't they? But go ahead and respond, please, Lucy.
Yes, these meetings have been taking place. They've been taking place over the past 2 years. We have the last group of people that have kind of held on to Companion. They are having these meetings and they're scheduling them. We are prioritizing the people who are in host homes, the people who are with providers, with the 8 providers that are not approved to provide Companion, and the people that are receiving Companion services 1 to 2.
We have people who have at an ISP meeting in the last month, companion services have been cut to days, even though the team has not agreed on what other day services they will move to.
Well,
I mean, I think that comes back to what Musu said earlier, reach out to the supervisor perhaps, I mean, right?
yes, absolutely, yes.
Because what we don't want, the reason for limitations on companion is that we don't want people sitting at home not engaged in their lives. And so we certainly don't want someone to just lose companion and have nothing whatsoever. The whole point of this is to make sure that people are as engaged as they can be in the community. Since these were added since then, I'll go to Shani and then come back to the chat. Shani Jones.
Great, this will be quick. My next question in reference to companion services is there a restriction in the hours that companion can be rendered? For instance, 9 to 5 only, 8 to 4 only, 7 to 3 only? Is there a time restriction?
Typically, companion services is 40 hours a week during daytime hours. There are exceptions that can be made for extenuating circumstances. For instance, if the person, for an example, needed supervision overnight because of a working parent who had a overnight shift, or a circumstance like that that would warrant outside of the daytime hours.
Thank you.
And I think one of the important issues is you can't have two services being provided at the same time. And that's one of the reasons for it being a daytime service, is that initially it was being offered to people who were who were receiving, for example, supported living. And so, you know, that could only be offered during those hours, that another day service would be offered, but. Also, we have persons who are over the age 65 who don't want to go to a day service. What is the process? We're told that even if the person and their team want to stay in companion 5 days, that it's not being authorized to 2 days. That's what companion was made for originally, is my understanding, right, Musu? So companion can be authorized for exactly that person. Someone who says, I can relate to this. I'm not going out during the day anymore. I'm 67 years old. I've gone to that day program long enough. I'm at an age where I've decided I want to sit home and have a quiet day. Originally, my understanding of companion was it was kind of like retirement from day. And so that is, those people are exactly the kind of people that companion 5 days a week was intended for. At the same time, 65 is not that old, people. Not sound defensive here. And all of us need to be engaged in our community. So making sure that the person still has goals that go along with that companion. Adrian, your hand is up.
Thank you again. So I'm just trying to process the information carefully and clearly for myself, so that I walk away with a better understanding of the process. So I understand, and my question is, if you have a person, so in our case, my family member has met 2 of the 3 criteria. She also is involved actively in community activities, as well as some in-home regarding companion. She has a significant physiological challenge right now, which has been documented, and our service coordinator has that from her physician, as well as substantiating information from her orthopedic surgeon. My greatest concern right now, because we are family and we have a dynamic understanding of her process. So in as much as she does go out into the community, we have to be very cautious and careful. We are not attempting to add a wheelchair or anything like that, but we have to be cautious. My concern is that in the past, when we had outside companions coming into the home and working with her, even in the community, that they were not able to really handle or have an understanding or an in-depth knowledge the way that we do of her specific needs. So for example, she walks and moves very, very slowly as a result of the issues that are going on regarding her spine. They're not genetic. They're something that anyone can have. And in this case, she is a person who has had, is very, very, very specialized, but she's had it twice. And only 5% of the people who have to have the type of surgery that she had initially have to come back, and she's in that 5%. So it means that we have to be exceedingly careful with her, but not limiting her to staying in the home at all. So she does go into the community with the companion service available to her. I am just trying to get some clarity on how a family member who is very knowledgeable and has known her and understands exactly what's going on, has been through the process with all the physicians, all the medical visits, and all of the activities that she does do. And she's been very active, but it's modified. How a person that knows her in that way, at that level, would not qualify at some point to be that person to support her, especially where it concerns the physiological situation. And so I guess my
Okay, Adrian, I don't want to cut you off.
You
saying
can.
you're asking, okay, you're saying you're asking for clarity. We have clarity. Companion services cannot be provided by a family member, and there are no exceptions. There are services that family members can provide. It is also true, I guess I shouldn't say there are no exceptions, people who receive participant-directed services, which are offered through our individual and family support waiver, which is capped at $75,000 a year in services. If the person doesn't need more than $75,000 a year, they can get companion services as part of participant-directed services in the IFS waiver. Other than that, there is no mechanism for a family member to provide companion services. There are other services that family members can provide if they're hired by a provider agency. I think that covered the field, right, Musu? Because the next question here is, can family members provide IDS?
Thank you for that as well. Thank you for the answer.
I know that it's not the one you're looking for, but you also said you wanted clarity, and I do think that's clear. So Musu or Pam or Mark, can someone answer the question, can family members be an IDS, provide IDS service?
Yes, the IDS is a service that can, the family member can serve as the DSP to support the person.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to our next presentation? Not a question. This really comes down to service coordinators explaining and, quite frankly, not understanding the ins and outs of who should or could continue with companion. Or has been a heavy-handed without explanation, which is why you are getting the same questions over and over. I don't know that I agree with that. I think that what the reality is, I think today's conversation has been the most robust conversation we've had. And that is probably because November 11th is about 3 weeks from now. The previous conversations felt much more hypothetical. This one is becoming very real. And the service coordinators have received a number of different, they meet monthly as a group. I know that Musu has she's gone over this with us here 3 times. She's gone over it with her team more than that. So there's a comment here in the chat. IDS staff, if a family member cannot be legally responsible for the person.
So the way that the regulation is written, it specifically speaks to a guardian or someone who's legally responsible for the person as the exclusion.
Oh, okay. So he is correct that a family member can, however, a guardian or someone who is legally responsible for the person cannot.
Correct.
However, a parent, the day that your child turns 18, is no longer legally responsible. They're just a family member at that point, right?
Correct.
Thank you. Salanda has a hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'm referring to the comment that was made I'm one of those people who had a service coordinator who, I guess for years, has said things he said to other clients. And then when it came to me, I questioned what was said and found out that a lot of things he told me was not true. Because I know when we got together to draft my son's ISP, companion service was drafted. And he was just transitioning out of St. Coletta right as the pandemic hit. So once I got companion service, I was then told maybe 2 weeks before they were going to reduce the time. So I lost a companion person that worked with him because that person had a child of their own, and to be reduced from 5 days to 3 days in 2-week notice. So of course I brought it to the forefront, and I did talk to you guys. I've emailed Musu, I've emailed you, Mr. Andy, Mr. Reed, I've emailed just about everybody in DDS about this situation because I felt like this was a major mess up. I mean, it was handled poorly. I got into a confrontation with my service coordinator because he obviously believed what he said was true, which it wasn't, after I quoted the municipal regs. So I think you guys really need to make sure that the service coordinators are educated on what they're saying, because they're saying things they said to people for years. But me as a parent, I don't know what he said to someone 30 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm not that parent from 30 years ago, 20 years ago. My goal for my son is not for my child to be in some institution, some group home, somewhere sitting in a gym, watching TVs, watching movies, going on a field trip here and there, where people are not really watching your kids. Because I've been around and I've seen some of these day programs, and I shake my head and I ask the name because I want to make sure my son does not end up in it. If I put him in a day program, he's not going to end up in that one. So I really think for you guys to sit back and say you don't think these things are happening with service coordinators, they are. And I'm an example, and I've sent emails over and over again. I mean, and once I sent emails, I was retaliated against. Things was done to reduce my son's in-home support services, but I let that slide. And yes, I had a doctor's note, and it took almost a month. I lost the best person I had to work with my son as a companion because it took a month for you guys to agree that his doctor's prescription, not a note, it was a prescription. Because every time I get with my son's doctor, I ask about prescriptions because he knows my son since I gave birth. He's been with my son up until I gave birth. So it was no need for me to have to say, what do you think? And will he need that? These are things he would get together with me and ask me. So now you get a transition. And because he knew the system, he would ask me, what did I think? And he was like,
Okay,
these are the prescriptions you're gonna need.
Solanda, I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop you there just because, this is a
Fine,
community
fine.
forum. We have
Yeah,
100.
but I just think you guys need to really,
and it's
service
not about
coordinators
an
need to be
individual.
educated.
I just want to.
I know as an individual, but the thing is, if it happens to me, it's going to happen to the next person, because I was coming into the program from St. Coletta, and I was told things that were not true. And then I had this whole thing. I had to fight for my son's companionship. And I did everything you guys said I was supposed to do. I handed a prescription. It was a month later that
I appreciate, and it's true for me, and I think it's true for the 150 people who are here. Every one of us may make mistakes. And this is the reason that Musu said, please bring them to her attention. Please bring them to the supervisor's attention, the program manager's attention, Musu's attention, then Winslow's attention, then my attention. The purpose of this meeting is for the whole community. We can't address individual issues, especially to take up a long time in addressing individual issues. If there's more to talk about the individual issue, please reach out to Musu after the meeting and discuss more about the individual issue with her then. If there are any other questions that people have, Musu, people would like you to share your contact information. I'd also like to caution people, please. Musu supervises 3 program managers, and they supervise 10, I believe, supervisors. So there is a chain there. Please go through that, but Musu will provide her contact information as well. But also, anyone in this agency, and we've checked recently, we haven't checked, we've confirmed for people, and we will be checking to make sure it's true. Everyone has information that's supposed to be included in their voicemail that includes their supervisor's contact information. So if you have concerns about something, a decision made by your service coordinator on their voicemail, you should be able to find their supervisor's telephone number. You should call their supervisor. You can also look on our website and you can see our organizational chart, and you can see contact information for everyone all the way up the chain. So thank you, Musu, Pam. As I said, a much more robust conversation this time than it has been the two prior times. It is at this time perhaps more real for people than it was before. It was hypothetical last April, perhaps. November 11th will be here very soon. And so now it's very real, and we're really getting down to the wire with people having very real questions and concerns. Next up, Catherine is Mello. I'm missing one of your last names. I'm sorry.
Reinhardt Mello, that's fine.
Reinhardt Mello. Okay. We'll do a presentation on our NEON grant.
Yeah, so we'll switch gears quite a lot.
Including telling us what NEON stands for.
Okay. All right, let me get my my slides up. Yeah, it's a pretty good a switch here to talking about some of our initiatives and collaborations with some of our partner agencies around employment for people with disabilities. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, thank you. All right. So we took the opportunity last year at the advice of some folks that participated with us in the World Cafe that we hosted a little over a year ago, and talked about what the community thought about what we needed to do to increase competitive integrated employment. And one of the recommendations was that we should be looking at ourselves, meaning the DC government, and making sure that we were walking the walk and demonstrating that we could be a good employer for people with disabilities. So, so we got an opportunity through the Department of Labor to participate in a competitive solicitation process and get some technical assistance to help us to at least look at what we have going on now around DC government as an employer of people with disabilities, and start thinking about what we needed to change, what we may need to do better. And so we got support from two nationally recognized subject matter experts who worked on same initiatives, so that state as a model employer in other states, to help us with our assessments and then our work plan. And we really got a robust response from other agencies. We had the support of the mayor who was saying publicly that this is a priority for her too, to make the government look like the people that live in the district. And so we really had a lot of partners on this project. And we have to highlight DCHR because they really came to the table and did really co-led the work that we did in this project. So we certainly appreciate them. And so why would this be important? Looking at why would the DC government need to really look back at ourselves and make sure that we are modeling what it looks like to be a good employer. So we should be leading by example. At a minimum, we should be doing everything that we ask other employers to do. And that we should reflect the diversity of the folks that live in the district, whether it is background or ward, race, ethnicity, disability, that the government should reflect that diversity. And then thinking about people that may acquire disabilities during their employment with the DC government, thinking about retaining those folks. And maybe that means making some modifications, but limiting that turnover where there doesn't really have to be a change in job or somebody leaving a position can keep the services going smoothly so that people are responsive within agencies, as well as saving some taxpayer dollars. And then we wanted to look at the workplaces themselves, like what it's like to work in a particular unit agency, and work on building up some more inclusivity, because that really benefits everyone that works there, not just maybe an employee with disability or from a marginalized group. And we wanted to highlight for our partners that employees with disabilities are underrepresented in both public and private sectors. That doesn't mean for lack of talent, but sometimes that talent is underappreciated. And then we wanted to create a talent pipeline to make the government look more friendly to people with disability, that this is a good place to work. So please bring your talents to us, the DC government, and help fill some of the positions that may be tough to fill or that have been high turnover. All right, so what have we done so far? So we had our last NEON grant from January, and it ended the first week of September. So we had a pretty short time period to work with our subject matter experts. We were able to create a landscape assessment to look at our current policies and practices, look at how we develop talent, some of the apprenticeship programs, things along those lines, to help, help people get into those positions. What our hiring practices look like and what supports are available to people who might be holding some of those positions or interested in those positions. We developed a work plan with our partners in Employment First across agencies. And we looked at ways that we could integrate some of these strategies into other initiatives that were happening in the city. And that work is certainly continuing. We are starting implementation of our work plan. We have some subgroups going, and then we're starting to talk about, what we have done, what we're hoping to do next with the community now. So you can see in that last arrow that this is really where we are now. And we're working on our application for the next round of NEON grants, and what we might like to do to build on the work that we did in this, that past 8-month period. All right, so what did we identify in the work plan as some of our priorities, where we wanted to start? So our group really felt strongly that we needed to have sort of an internal focus on training, resource development first, before we really started working on hiring initiatives, so that we could communicate that we had made some progress with SAME, and that we were putting things in place to make the environment a good one once people did come into the government. So we said it was very important to us to continue that collaboration, interagency collaboration with that Employment First leadership work group, to implement our work plan and then look at what comes next, and the ways that we can really integrate SAME into other policies that may not specifically be about disability. That we really wanted to start with training hiring managers, focusing on the ADA and reasonable accommodations. That's something that we heard even within DDS was something that was a bit of a mystery to folks, and there wasn't a very clear understanding. So that was something we wanted to incorporate first, and then look at those inclusive workplace practices and make sure we're building up some capacity there and some resources. We also wanted to assess our current workplace flexibilities, look at our policies, look at our practices, and see what we have the flexibility to do as we are now, and what we may look at changing, or if we may want to make some modifications there. Okay, and we wanted to try to start getting some baseline data, that we don't have any good data about just how many people work in the DC government now and have a disability. And so we have a work group starting on a baseline survey. So this would be something that we would be doing periodically to ask a few questions. And what our group was most interested in was some about, do you identify as having a disability? And then thinking about what other elements we'd want to collect about that, and about people's experience or understanding of supports, that sort of thing. So that's in process now. That we wanted to assess the Careers DC platform for accessibility. Could people navigate the site? Were there any particular barriers that people encountered with just being able to complete the application? And were there any barriers that may be wording or maybe something that was more subliminal that maybe would have somebody stop mid-application and maybe not complete it? So we certainly wanted to do that and wanted to have people with a variety of different disabilities, needs to participate in that piece. And then we wanted to integrate some of the strategies that we identified into the WEO estate plan. And so that is something that's developed every 4 years and looks more broadly across workforce issues and some federal priorities there, and how DC is going to work on its workforce, and it includes people with disabilities, and RSA has a piece of that. So we're hoping to look at some places that aren't necessarily tied to RSA on integrating some of those strategies more citywide. All right. And so a few updates since we started, or since we ended the planning phase. We've met with our baseline survey subgroup. We have some identified target questions, and we're looking at the launch of something in the next few months of a survey in the next few months that will include some questions about identifying as having a disability. And we're working on the details there because there are a few other city priorities or a few other city initiatives that align to some degree. So we're working out the details. We're also working with another group that is revamping the DC Careers website and looking at really starting fresh on how that looks. So they've already updated the homepage, and then they're going to be developing what the platform looks like. So we are going to help with getting a group of folks with disabilities and a variety of needs together to help with the development, giving the recommendations about what maybe should be included or how it should look, how it should be worded, and then do some testing on that to try to make sure it's accessible. And also make sure that it's functional and there aren't any barriers, or there are fewer barriers maybe for more folks to be able to apply for those jobs. We're looking at manager training, starting with Manager Week, and implementing an ADA training. ODR is spearheading that. And then also more of a workshop where you explore some of your biases and something that is a little more personal for folks that would be part of that training to do that sort of introspective look at yourself and also get some information and ask some questions. So we have both of those planned for Manager Week for managers in the DC government. And then we're working on a new proposal that is due on the 29th of this month for the next round for the next year of NEON. And so we wanted to highlight our colleague Martin here, who was part of our same work group, who helped with the assessments and the work plan development. And he happens to work for DDS. So we wanted to get a few of his thoughts to share with you. There we go. Hi, Martin. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Martin Chio. I work at the Department of Disability Service as a program support assistant.
And how long have you been in that position?
I've been at this position for exactly 4 years and 1 month.
Great. And how did you decide to apply for a job with the DC government?
It's funny that you mentioned that. I actually wasn't trying become a DC government employee at first, but my counselors, they motivated me because they knew I had customer service skills before I started working here. And they told me, you should probably give it a try. And I did. And now I'm here for 4 years and still going strong.
Very cool. What do you like about your job?
One thing I love about my job is I get to meet new people and I get to meet new cultures.
Great, great. And then why do you think that the DC government should be a good example of an employer of people with disabilities?
I think the government should hire more people with disabilities because a disability doesn't define a person by who they are. A disability, it shouldn't be a challenge for nobody, especially working in a government facility, because a person with a disability could do as much things like a person without disabilities. And that's important because, like I was saying, a disability doesn't define a person, and people should overcome those challenges and just, go with the flow.
Do you think the DC government is a good employer for people with disabilities?
I think DC government is a good place to start because DC government helps people with disabilities or people in general to further their career and also get new challenges. Like, what I mean by that is, let's say they give you opportunities to push yourself forward.
All right. Yeah, so we certainly appreciate Martin's participation and his input through this process. So next, this is what we are proposing for this round of NEON. And so it would again be getting some technical assistance from some national experts to help us with these objectives. So we wanted to look more in depth at what we could integrate into the WEO estate plan and continue to work with that Employment First Leadership Work Group on that. We wanted to look more at hiring manager training, doing training for managers, including hiring managers, and make sure that we had really robust resources and also get some feedback on what was needed and make sure that we covered both the training end and then the follow-up and the resources for folks, maybe staff, maybe managers, maybe HR professionals, and maybe job seekers about what we have to offer and what options they have. We also wanted to look at a clearinghouse, doing a web-based clearinghouse of flexible employment strategies, including customized employment, and showing the support services, the assistive and enabling technologies that are available to help folks with their own individual situations, to do some problem solving and hopefully some kind of innovative thinking on how to make things work well for everybody. And this is something that could be updated over time. So we would get an expert to help us pull all of that together. And we also like the idea of expanding the roles of the ADA coordinator. So each agency does have an ADA coordinator that helps with the reasonable accommodations processes there. But we wanted to maybe provide some more training and enhance that role as a resource and a partner to help support retention of folks that work in those agencies. And this is something that was particularly appealing because every agency has one. It's not something that lives just at DDS, so this is something that would be spread out in all agencies. All right. Any questions about that?
Yes, there are a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. Is there any discussion of creating disability hiring goals for DC like those that are created by federal executive orders, first by Obama, then Biden?
Okay. And that almost answers the question that usually those things are tied to legislation and executive order, some of those performance indicators. So we don't have anything like that in place now, but we're trying to build up our data collection to be able to track the impact of some of the things that we're doing, but there isn't something that is mandated now. I don't know, Crystal, if you want to add to that.
We have, though, just
Mhm.
to be clear, DCHR has been an active participant in this process, and we have raised on a number of occasions, and I think that they understand the Schedule A hiring authority in the federal government and how the federal government does this. And so we've had discussions about this issue, and they're discussions that we expect to continue having about how the district can, well, we're trying to be a model employer, and I think establishing a baseline of where we stand, because, when the federal government established their goal, they then sort of counted and said, oh, what do you know? We've already met our goal. So we do want to know where we stand in that regard. And I think also having a goal is important. And I think I've mentioned to people before, has been, when I've met with the mayor, this has been a priority of hers. And so getting to the step of sort of specific requirements could be something that would be discussed. I think it would be discussed first by DCHR and then raised to her by them. But they are active participants in this project with us. So, Crystal, do you have anything else to add to that?
Hi, everyone. No, we're excited to work with DCHR on, as Catherine mentioned, having a survey so that we could obtain some sort of baseline data. But that's pretty much all I was going to share.
I think
so. The other question is the current application that we have online 508 compliant? Is it fully accessible?
And I think the answer was no, if I remember correctly on that, but that was something that was in the works. But what we're working toward with that accessibility work group is really doing that from development up. But that's something that I think someone else would have to confirm if that's correct. I think there were a few features that may have had an issue, and so they were offering different supports for folks that had any issues with accessibility through DCHR. That's my understanding. But we're really working, but that's really why we're trying to build that in from the development up on the new platform that DCHR and partners are working on with people with disabilities. I do want to add one more thing back to the data collection. And one of the things that we always talk about is that everybody has the choice about disclosing or how they identify, whether they identify as a person with a disability at all, and then whether you choose to disclose it to anybody in a survey, in an interview, anytime. So data collection gets interesting when there certainly is not a requirement that anybody discloses. We're just asking if people feel comfortable doing it in some form. All right, what's next?
So next, this isn't a question, but a statement. I realize DDS does not directly run the annual employment summit, but they do work with the DC Coalition. I think what they mean is the DD Council who runs it. I'm surprised that in light of the companion changes, that the employment summit happening next Tuesday has not been advertised. It could connect people to different day programs and community activities that are available to people served by DDS. So an oversight on our part not to have raised the Employment First Summit is next Tuesday. As people may be aware, we are in National Disability Employment Awareness Month. The last day of it is next Tuesday, and on that day we will be having we are partners with the DD Council on hosting the Employment First Summit. I don't think that talking about day services would be part of the Employment First Summit. What definitely would be, however, is supported employment as a day and employment service, and other employment options that are available to people with disabilities. So sorry for that oversight. We have been advertising it. We are one of the partners, and the DD Council, of course, has also been advertising it, but should have remembered to reference that today. That is next Tuesday. I think it's from 9:30 to 4 at the Martin Luther King. I'll look at my calendar at the Martin Luther King Library. I'm sorry, it's on my calendar from 9 to 4. It's at the Martin Luther King Library at 901 G Street.
And I can pop a flyer, I think, in the chat in just in a minute. Do you have anything else?
Just to
Wait a
respond.
sec. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just to respond to the person in regards to day programs, we did have a provider fair back in July, where we invited all of our providers out and families, so to give people an opportunity to meet different providers.
Working with people with disabilities on accessibility is critically important. For some reason, but also getting the IT expertise to ensure 508 compliance is also critical. No disagreement here. And 508 compliance, not only to achieve it, but then maintain it, because anyone who's responsible for maintaining 508 compliance with their agency's website would know that it's an ongoing effort. And I do know that the platform that's used, it's not just for hiring, it's used for ongoing support for our staff. DCHR is working with Octo on ensuring that it is compliant, because there are still some challenges with it. So someone did share the flyer regarding the person who raised the question about the Employment First Summit. They did, that is here in the chat, so people can click on that and you'll see the Facebook post that the DD Council has on their site for the Employment First Summit next Tuesday.
Is that it?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Have a great weekend, everyone. And we will be, we have our planning meetings for our forums, and we didn't discuss this perhaps at our planning. I was out for our October planning meeting. I know that last year, so our forums occur on the fourth Friday of the month. And did you all discuss this? Yeah. So our forums occur on the fourth Friday of the month. People may be aware that the fourth Thursday of the month in November is Thanksgiving. And many of us will be hoping, and I will start getting questions around the second week of November. Are we going to have to work on the day after Thanksgiving? And I don't know the answer. I see here we agreed that the next meeting, thank you, Sean, should be a combined November-December meeting, and it will occur on December the 1st. So our next community and provider forum will be on December the 1st. And we will be developing. We don't yet have an agenda for that, is my guess.
We have DAPL scheduled tentatively, and
because the challenge, I will also say, is we do our planning meeting on the second Friday of the month. And the second Friday of the month in November happens to be also a holiday. It is November the 10th, and it is Veterans Day observed. And so for people who are on the planning committee, if it is that we have not yet developed the plan for our combined November-December meeting, I will be sending out a new invite because I do not plan to work, at least on these issues, on November the 10th. And so we will have a planning meeting. I expect if we need it, we'll have a planning meeting in November, and we'll identify a date that works for the people who are on the planning committee with us. So with that, I will see all of you, I hope, December 1st. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we'll be talking with the planning committee as necessary between now and then. Thanks a lot.